Hello, everyone. Welcome to Rappler Talk. I'm Pia Renada, and today we're speaking with Julia Nebrija, an urban planner and co-founder of Agile Partners, an international consultancy for cities responding to urban challenges. Welcome and glad to have you here, Julia.
Thank you so much, Pia.
Let's dive right into it. Being an urban planner and also seeing the effects of the pandemic, how do you think we are seeing an appreciation for urban spaces, public spaces, and green spaces now? Especially just to give people a background with how countries now are relaxing their measures. So we've seen countries, including the Philippines, allowing more people to go out, and even long before, even during the lockdown, the government actually allowed even elderly and children to go out for exercise. So there's already been this realization and appreciation for the value of being outdoors and how it can help, people's health, physical health, but also mental health. So given that recognition, and now we're moving to opening up our economy, allowing people to move out of their homes. And now even in the Philippines, we already see people flocking to parks and green spaces. But in Metro Manila, we obviously very much feel a lack of these kinds of facilities. And I guess it's something that our government has also been faced with, from national government to local governments, planning out certain policies that encourage these green spaces. So, Julia, banking on your experience with urban planning, how do you see parks and green spaces fit in our pandemic world?
Everyone, I think, understands and wants to get out of their house, get out of their apartment, be able to breathe some fresh air, take a walk, get some exercise, see other people, socialize. Like you mentioned, it's both a physical and also mental health issue at this point. And in the Philippines, in Philippine cities, it's something that we have known for decades because we've underinvested in the quantity, the accessibility, and the quality of the public realm. But we felt it collectively very strongly during this pandemic. And I think that's what's giving new energy to this agenda to really increase the number of public spaces that people can use in our cities. Where do you go? If you live in the city of Manila, you might be able to, use Rizal Park. You might be able to go to Intramuros. You might be able to go to Manila Bay for a walk. But a lot of the cities don't have this kind of open space accessible to them. And it's a problem on so many levels, even before the pandemic. So any type of crises that we experience, whether it's a flood, right? We need public open space, green space to absorb water where it falls, right? That is going to help us to prevent to reduce the amount of flooding that we have in our cities. We need it for urban cooling. We need trees to be able to provide shade, to be pleasant outside, but also to protect us during rain. We have two seasons. It's either raining or it's not raining. So it's sunny or it's not sunny, right? And in both scenarios, trees really help a lot. Green coverage helps a lot. In an earthquake, if you need to run outside and evacuate to someplace, you need big open spaces in order to do that. So now we're adding to that portfolio pandemic, this type of health crisis where people we're so much safer to be outside than indoors. And then if you don't have places to spend outdoors, we really suffer being inside alone and without moving our bodies. I think for a lot of people, unless you've been privileged enough to live in a gated community that has a park, or in one of the cities that has planned this and invested in this for its citizens, now we know on a very, very large scale what it means to need this public space urgently. So I think it's timely for a lot of cities who are taking initiative to take back street space, to look at underutilized available land and say, can we turn this into a park? Transforming parking lots and say, all right, now these are, empty during the early morning and the evenings. Let's turn them into markets, Zumba, Zumba gathering places, badminton courts, basketball courts. These are all great ideas. And it's really great to see a lot of cities embracing these at this time.
Mm-hmm. Could you give us a little maybe contrast just to show people just how small the amount of green space in Metro Manila is compared to other cities?
Yeah, so we have this 2011 study that was done, the Asia Green City Index, and that was the only collective figure that we have that shows in the city of Manila there was 5 square meters of public open space of green space per capita. The World Health Organization recommends that we have, for a healthy city and healthy society, we would have 9 square meters as a minimum. Most cities have more than that. Some cities have less. But it's not just about the amount of space, but it's also about the accessibility. So in addition to the amount, the recommendation is for a 10 to 15 minute walk from where you live. So some cities have this campaign, the 10-minute walk. The US has been strong in promoting that, to really put parks where people live. Cities like Barcelona have been doing this by taking back super blocks where they close off, 3x3 street area to give back that space to the residents who actually live there. So in the case, for instance, in Metro Manila, we have Ecomesa Park, which is a wonderful, beautiful place, green space, very pleasant. But you'd have to pretty much have a car to go there or live near there to be able to access it. Many of our spaces are like that. Whereas what we want to move towards is to really get those public spaces where people live. So those are two indicators that we can really improve on, is the amount of public space per person and also the accessibility to that space. And then the third is the quality of the actual, park or plaza or waterfront. You want to make sure that there's the right lighting, that there's somewhere to sit. Not only is it safe, but it's clean, and it's also has some type of attention to who uses it and how they use it. Is this something for kids? Is this something for seniors? Although generally, if you plan it and design it really nicely, it can be used by everyone. So, you don't want to see this kind of isolated types of designs. Should be universally accessible. People with PW, persons with disabilities, or basically anyone can use this space, and it should be culturally relevant as well. So not every type of park that you're going to see in London might be something that we want to have in the Philippines. We have different ways of enjoying being together outside, and we should pay attention to that. Something that's really beautiful to see is if you go to Luneta Park, Rizal Park, early in the morning, you'll see arnis, you'll see Zumba, you'll see people in the evening, student groups gathering to practice dance, practice theater performances. We're very actively, Filipinos like to be outside. They like to gather. They like to be together. And it's not abnormal. The number one attraction of a public space is to see and be seen, right? That's the number one activity that we want. And especially being very chismoso in the Philippines, we need that kind of, eyes on each other, just so that there's something to also talk about. I think we should really recognize that as something very valuable. So we're not, some countries spend a lot of money trying to get their citizens to go outside and exercise and interact. We don't really have that problem in the Philippines, I think. So that's really an asset.
So the doctors that I spoke with are 100% behind your idea of opening more parks and allowing people to go out in green spaces. And they say that, especially, for example, Dr. Antonio Dance, one of the doctors who were very outspoken during the pandemic, was mentioning that if you do an indoor activity outdoors, the risk of you contracting COVID is reduced by 94%. So this is pretty much in agreement with many doctors who really see the health benefits of parks in the time of COVID-19. But I guess a practical question, especially for urban planners and city managers or city administrators and mayors, how would you propose creating parks and green spaces in urban poor areas where there's really no space? At least when the first thing that meets the eye is, like houses that are very cramped together, streets that are very small, and hardly any empty lots left that they can purchase and turn into a park. Like, what are some ways where we can operate within these limitations, but still come up with spaces for people to move and exercise, and that can serve as a green space or park.
Sure. I mean, and just to add to the first point, this is of course something that's really critical for our public health at this time, is, being able to safely gather and exercise outside is so much healthier, as you said. We've needed public space for healthier cities and healthier people in general, even before this pandemic, though. So this adds another layer of urgency, but we've needed it for especially, pollution reduction, right? Having more green around the city helps clean the air. For carbon emissions, it's very important. We've needed it for better biodiversity in our cities, and we've needed it for better physical and mental health. Of course, this adds another layer to that need, because it's so much safer to be outside than to be indoors, like you mentioned. And in any city, majority of cities, the 80% of public space that's available to people is usually the street itself. And this is very, very true. If you look at any aerial photos of Metro Manila, if you look at any maps, there's very sparse green pockets. The majority of the space that everyone has access to is the street. So, unless you are flying in a helicopter from your bed to your place of, your office or whatever, everyone touches the street at some point. So this is the majority of our public realm. And this is where a lot of cities are seeing a big transformation, big impact, is taking back that space and giving it to people. Right now, the way that we design streets is car-centric. We think of a street as an overall right-of-way from building edge to building edge as a percentage of what goes to the vehicle, and this little bit goes to everybody else. A minimum 1.2 meter sidewalk, if you're lucky, if it exists, if it's continuous, if there's not a pole in the middle of it, So what a lot of cities have done before, and also during this pandemic, is to close streets, give them back to the people certain times of day, redesign them to improve the pedestrian realm, or putting in linear parks. These are ways that can be done, very, very quickly. It doesn't cost a lot of money to put up a couple of cones and signs saying that this is now, no longer a vehicle through road, and letting people come outside and play basketball and, put a chair out, sell something. It's, these are very easy ways to completely transform the space and give it back to people. We've seen this in a number of examples in the Philippines. Of course, we have the car-free Sundays in a number of cities. You have, of course, in Pasig, you have pop-up bike lanes that have been happening now all over the country. And that's been a very significant example, I think, to show how quickly you can reverse the traditional pattern. This is something in line with tactical urbanism that's been, popular across the globe. And then in a lot of cities, what they do is they start with this kind of more temporary, experimental type of approach, and then eventually they can make it permanent as people get used to it, as policies are ironed out, as kinks are worked through, and eventually you can have really beautiful streets that work for everyone, from a child to someone who's, your Lola.
Also on the issue of taking things outside, like you mentioned, streets can be reconfigured into parks or open spaces. There's also been this growing call that I've read in certain papers on urban planning amid COVID, which you actually sent my way. The concept of bringing other facilities, other establishments outside, like restaurants should now also transition outside. Also, stores that usually would have been in the mall in normal times can also open up shop outside, maybe in streets or in parks. So do you think this is something that Philippine businesses can do, especially now that we're trying to open up our economy more and ensuring people have jobs?
Absolutely. And so, the street can be many things. And if it's on a busy commercial street, that you need to extend the dining area into the sidewalk area or into the street, into the roadway itself. Many cities are doing that. That's actually how New York is able to kind of come back with some of its restaurant industry, is being able to put that outdoor seating to ensure that they can get more tables, more foot traffic. This is something where you need, one of the things that we're experiencing is higher home delivery, right? So the way that you treat your curbs, you're having a lot more people come up to the side of your road and dropping things off, delivering goods. So that needs to be rethought. Loading and unloading zones need to be given priority as well, space as well. So there's a lot of different uses for the street, especially for businesses. Queuing lines. You might not be able to let in more than 3 or 4 people at a time into your store. So the queuing lines, that's something that a lot of small, ground level floor stores have needed to try to negotiate, is having 20 people wait outside on the sidewalk that you didn't have before. On that same, if you have a very limited amount of space, so you have 20 people waiting there, you have extensions coming out, you have people also trying to move. We just need more space. So this is the time that people have always needed more space on the roads, but now it's even more critical because everything is coming out into the public realm that it cannot be absorbed anymore indoors. So there are a number of different strategies. The one that I sent you, the NACTO Streets for a Pandemic Response, gives a lot of great templates for how to do that. And most of them involve rope, bollards, plant boxes, paint, signage. It's really the decision to say, we're going to do this. We're going to give space back to people. And once you make that decision, it's actually quite quick to move forward. It's low cost. And these are available materials that you can find and easily mobilize. It's really making the decision to say, all right, this space now belongs to people, and we're going to use it for business. We're going to use it for play. We're going to use it for exercise. We're going to use it for personal mobility. We're not going to use it for private cars. That's the decision that has needed to be made since before this pandemic. And this is our opportunity to do it once and for all and give people the kind of city that they deserve.
One of the concerns of people who are listening to proposals like this is how to balance safety with opening up these spaces. Because, for example, we've seen in the opening of Manila Bay's White Sand Beach where people just went there in droves and there was no social distancing, and people were fearing transmission of disease for a leisure activity. They were there to do Zumba. Some of them just wanted to see the beach for themselves. So how would you, as an urban planner, go ahead with this idea to open spaces but still ensure the necessary health protocols for COVID-19 are in place?
Some cities, what they're doing is they're doing blocked times. So, you can go with young children at a certain time, seniors have a certain time. There's kind of a code to who can go at any point. Some cities are also using technology to say when places are crowded, and you can actually check that before you go to an area to see if something is kind of if everyone has gone to the park at the same time, or has gone to the store, or is crowding a certain facility. You can check these before you actually physically go somewhere. And then of course having added security on site. A lot of public places have had to do that, to have roving presence, to make sure that people are socially distanced, make sure that people are wearing masks, and make sure that places are not overly crowded. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge, but I think in addition is just having more opportunities so not everyone is crowding to the exact same place. So like you were asking before, I mean, putting in these activities where people live, putting these opportunities to be outside near where, in the neighborhoods, is one example. And also, a lot of cities outside of Metro Manila still have space. I mean, we keep thinking of cities in the Philippines, being only Metro Manila, but we have 145 cities across the country. And a lot of them still have space, still have opportunity to really set that aside for public use. They're actually required to by local government code and the comprehensive land use plan guidelines. But really enforcing that is another story. But there's really an opportunity to plan that in for these cities that are starting to really grow now, that they can do a better job. And even in Metro Manila, there's tons of underutilized land that could be, given to the public trust, and given back to public use. But I think, management will be key, whether it's watching the number of people, cleaning the area, making sure it's maintained over time. These are very important parts of public space management. A really good example, I think, is Washington Sisip Park. Have you been there in Makati? Yeah. And that's, right in the middle of the neighborhood. So you see a diverse mix of people taking their lunch break, people who might live there, people who are using it just as a nicer way to cut through their daily commute, to pass by this nice area instead of walking around the perimeter. It works for people who are young, people who are old. It has a sense of local context. It has native trees. It has local art. You have this feel that it's really integrated into the urban fabric of the neighborhood. It's not dominating. And it's a good size right where people are. I mean, that's the kind of scale that I would love to see. I mean, not everything's going to be like Rizal Park, in every city. Not every city is going to have a central park. Something like Washington Sisip Park, something like Valenzuela People's Park, the TLC Park in Taguig, these kind of smaller, there was one outside of a fish market in Cebu. Co-locating these things to markets, near schools, near residential areas. This is something that I think is going to be winning for the cities in the Philippines.
My last question has to do with funding, because it's a very important aspect of urban planning. And before you were involved with the Department of Budget and Management's program called Green, 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 and it was allocating 2.5 billion yearly to cities to make more public parks and green spaces. So since it started in 2018 until now, you could say actually that the project's timing was perfect, because it would have given funding in time for COVID-19, where we would expect to have more of these parks. So could you maybe give us a brief background on this project and how it was received by mayors and cities, and how, if you've heard of how it's been doing and how the cities have been implementing this program?
Yeah. So at the time, Secretary Jokno was there in DBM, and we were really thinking of adding something to the Build, Build, Build program that was more on the soft infrastructure side, because a lot of it was this very, very hard infrastructure, roads, bridges, this kinds of big ticket projects. And we were looking at, what can we do to really improve quality of life in cities across the country. Cities are economic drivers, they're cultural hubs. What can we invest in that can really improve quality of life for everyday people? And so we landed on, let's invest in public open spaces. It's something that is not done enough, and it's something that is so critical and can be felt immediately by a large population. So the fund was put up, and there was an allocation for every single city. Not like you have to apply with a proposal and then see how much funding you get. There was a pre-allocated amount based on population and land area, and it was set aside for every single city, so they don't have to compete. And they just had to submit their proposal, which we went through pretty intensively. And I think the most challenging part is that, because it's kind of a new field in a way, that when we really came down to designing the public realm, I think that was a little bit challenging. But it was well received by the cities, I think, and something that a lot of them really want to do. It's not rocket science. Like, you have to convince people that public space is important. They know it. They want to be outside. They want to have a place to bring their kids. They want to be able to enjoy their city in a new way, so I think it was interesting to see that there were so many ideas. There was actually so many ways that it could be done, whether it was improving the street near a popular marketplace, or transforming a sports, like a track facility, and making a park in the center, because they didn't have that much space. And the one place that you did really have was a track, and the green space in the middle of the track is not really utilized, only when you have big events, only certain times of day. And so that could become a public park. Transforming that whole facility into a public park would be something that helps to really activate and better utilize that space. We saw linear parks, a lot of waterfront. So whether it's coastal or it's riverfront, a lot of opportunities in many cities to take that back and develop that as a linear park. We saw even mangrove parks, where they wanted to do boardwalks in these ecological zones that are very, very special, because we have, I think, like 48 species of mangroves in the Philippines. It's a very unique environment. So giving people a way to experience that through board walking, we saw all kinds of creative, innovative ideas through this project. And it just really goes to show that not only is it in high demand, but we have all these interesting opportunities to explore with a little bit of, technical assistance on design, how to actually develop these projects, and the right type of funding. We could be this beautiful green city, nation of cities that would be very unique. The biodiversity that we have is incredible. And a lot of the locality, where you get your name from, Antipolo, is because of the Antipolo tree, things like that. So it's really, of course it's critical, but it's also something that could be very special in terms of lending culture, identity, and sense of place to a lot of cities that, are tending to look very much the same. And I think can really lend to a sense of Filipino urbanism that's not just born of like post-colonial American or Spanish times, right? Because we have these very colonial government centers that came from the American period, and then we have the Spanish type plaza. So I think engaging on this dialogue of what is public space for Filipinos would really bring our sense of Filipino urbanism to the next level. Although I know that's not on everyone's mind. But I think it's an interesting topic as well for people interested in that field.
What's the latest you've heard of the project, and how cities have been implementing or spending their grant money?
So I know that they're in the third year, and I'm not sure if this is going to be the last year of the funding or not. But I know that that cities have been able to access the funds, and I hope that a lot of the projects that we started back, 2018 through 2019 and 20, and have been either completed or expanded. We had several training sessions as well for those local government units to learn more about good urban design, to learn also about project implementation, the challenges, the opportunities. So we actually had a tour. A lot of them came. We offered a tour to see some of the public spaces around Metro Manila, including a couple of parks designed by Paulo Alcazaran, and even walking them through like light fixtures, seating types, pavement types, how to plant and deal with water management, how to deal with the management of the park itself. So we partnered also with Ayala at that time to have some education on on the management side. So I hope that, this is something that will need to be an exercise over time, but I hope that at least we set a good foundation for them to build on.
Okay. Thank you so much, Julia, for sharing your insights. And yes, we in Rappler are one with you in hoping that this might give rise to more green spaces and public parks for Filipinos. So thank you so much for joining us.